in any way involved in recovery in Lincoln, Nebraska, or even around Lincoln in the last 30, back when we started counting years with 19 before him, this person has been involved, and I mean more than involved. In the room next door, there's some stuff, back when, again, I'm showing my age, but Lincoln used to have two newspapers, and one was in the morning called the Star, and one was in the evening called the Journal. What I'm getting at here is there's articles on the wall next door, in the room next door, about this person. So she's really had a strong influence in a lot of people's lives. And the other thing I was going to say is, one of the things I get a kick out of listening to her is I never know what she's going to say. So I'm just saying that's me personally, right? Okay. And now there's going to be some other people helping introduce her, so come on down. And be careful, there's an extra cord up here, so whoever's introducing her, want to help me out here? We're kind of making this up as we go along, if you hadn't noticed.
Hi, I'm Roanne. I'm an alcoholic, and I'd like to introduce this gal. When I was thinking about her today, I was thinking about the triangle, the unity, recovery, and service work, and that's what she does. You know, like Earl said, the service work, she's been a drug and alcohol counselor for many years at the Independence Center. She's started the detox unit in Lincoln, Nebraska. She does the 12-step work, and she's got some crazy stories, and she does the deal. And so I like to introduce BJ, our speaker today, and somebody else would like to introduce her also.
My name's Steve. I'm an alcoholic. Steve. It's a great honor and privilege to be up here to honor my mom. When I got here, I was losing a lot of things like people do when they get here. And one of the things was my mother. She died from cancer. And I was telling BJ about it, how it broke my heart, that I was a mama's boy. And she said, I can't remember what she said, but she said, don't worry, honey, I'm your mom now. And it's been a great friendship ever since, 23 years, consistent friendship, a lot of love, and it just feels good to give some love back to BJ. Congratulations, BJ, on 48 years. Thank you.
Our speaker is BJ.
Well, I'm BJ Munyon. I'm a very grateful alcoholic. Thanks for the introduction. I call Ro the blonde bomber. And Steve, you know I love you dearly. I take him chicken noodle soup and stuff if he's sick and help take care of him. And he plays golf with Claire all the time, so we're keeping this program. Now, growing up, I had such low self-esteem and hated my picture taken. So this is for you. That's about every picture my mother ever took of me, because I always cut up, did something stupid, something dumb. Because of that low self-esteem, I attended church in here when I was a kid. I lived up the street at 3032 S Street, and when the dysfunction at home was going on, I would come in here and I would sit, because it was calm, it was serene, and who could not love these stained glass windows? I mean, you could just sit in here, even now, just take a little visual of how beautiful it is in here. Anyway, I am an alcoholic, and thanks for the introduction. You know, I can stand up here and I can go over and over with you the dysfunction in my house growing up as a kid, the abuse, verbal, emotional, physical, the whole gamut. But I don't have to dwell on that anymore, and that's one of the promises of Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't shut the door on the past, but we don't have to dwell on it anymore. You know, Claire always liked some of my stories when I was drinking. I did, you know, we all do stupid things. Raise your hand if you never did anything dumb when you were drinking. Or sit here for a moment and think about either the most dangerous thing you ever did when you were drinking, or the dumbest. I'll bet they were good, James. I can remember, I had a guy in treatment one time, and he said, "Don't you remember me?" And I was the counselor, and I said, "No." "Well, we used to date, and you lived on St. Paul Street, and I had a red convertible, and you had a little daughter." And I'm thinking, God, who is this guy? Because I'm not remembering much. And he said, "One night we were out, and it was in November, and we had the top down on the car, and it was cold, and you took off your clothes, jumped in Oak Lake, and went swimming." I'm thinking, now, that's a little crazy in late November in Lincoln, Nebraska. But things like that come back to haunt you, especially if you were a blackout drinker like I was, and you don't remember a lot of that stuff. You know, I love that song, "You go to bed with a 10 and you wake up with a 2. What's that? I think Alan Jackson, her missing her left front tooth. We do some bizarre things when we're drinking. You know, I started drinking at about age 15. And it was, I don't know if it was just to fit in or whatever, and that's what we did. We didn't have the drugs, the marijuana, and all the stuff. Thank God that stuff wasn't out there back in the 50s. I'm dating myself there a little bit. Before I forget, I want to thank the ladies I sponsored that showed up here today. I love it. Some people call them pigeons and babies. The women I sponsor are all ladies. They are ladies. I don't refer to you as pigeons. Pigeons shit all over everything, you know that. But I don't consider the women I sponsor anything other than ladies, so I want to make that clear. Anyway, you know, I hate being recorded. You know, if you ever talk to my husband, make sure he has his hearing aid in. Because he said, "Hey, we want to record you." And I said, "No." And he swears I said, "Yes." And David walked in with this equipment. Go figure. Anyway, you think it's scary being up here? Be up here with somebody videoing you. I mean, what a trip. Anyway, my drinking career started out, I was about 15 years old, didn't get in a lot of trouble, nothing, until after I was 21. I got married at 19, moved to California, had a baby. That marriage didn't work. I come back right when I was turning 21 and took over my mother's club. The Hilltop Club was at 56th and O here in Lincoln. There's a bank building there now. And I became a mixologist. For you lay people, that's a bartender. Anyway, I learned to mix drinks by people telling me what went in them. And that's when my drinking really, really escalated. You know, I had so many issues I didn't know at the time from my childhood that I drank on. You know, if you'd been physically, emotionally abused, if you'd this, if you'd that, well, you'd drink too. And I had a lot of low self-esteem, didn't look in the mirror, didn't like myself very well, and I drank to escape and always tried to be somebody else, somebody that I wasn't, I guess because I never knew who I was. Biologically, my name is Billie Jean, and my maiden name was Downs, and I got called Billy Ups, Billy with the big boobs, Billy Goat, Billy the Kid. I had all these little nicknames that people would put on me, but when I drank, I didn't care. I just didn't care. Anyway, as my drinking progressed in the 20s, you know, I got to thinking about the childhood and the physical of it. My mother, when I was 15 years old, married a man that was 6'7", Irish, black hair, dark eyes, and he was very cruel, very mean, very abusive. And I've got an older brother that just passed of cancer a couple years ago, my brother Jack. He was an entertainer. And there was me and 2 sisters, and I've got a younger brother. But this stepdad was very physically, emotionally, sexually abusive. He was mean, he was cruel. And I could never understand why my mother married this man, because my father was an alcoholic. And he'd knock down Christmas trees on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day when he was drunk. You never knew. He was on the road, he never drank. He drove for Cushman's coast to coast, my dad did. And they divorced because of his drinking. But when I'm about 15 years old, my mom marries this guy, and guess what? This guy was fresh out of prison for statutory rape. And I could not understand, I couldn't comprehend why my mother would bring this man into our home when she had 3 young daughters. I couldn't understand it. My mom was always working 2 jobs. He was a drunk. He was abusive. I remember one time I said to my mother, I said, "What do you see in him? Why don't you get out?" And she said, I love him. And I thought, well, if that's love, I don't ever want to be in love. Don't ever want to be in love. But she finally got out of that marriage, and from the time I was probably 21, 2, until I was 29 years of age, he was my ticket to drink. He was my ticket to drink. The anger, the resentment, and anything that went with it. That was my ticket to drink. I come back from California, like I said, got into the bar business, ran my mother's club. Just the drinking, it was just bizarre, the blackout drinking. I remember I was about 26 years old. My mother had remarried a wonderful man that was in the military. And they moved to Florida, and one night, afternoon, my brothers and sisters come over, packed up all my stuff, put me and my daughter on a plane to Tampa, Florida, because I was so sick and I was not taking care of myself at all. In Tampa, Florida, I got the most wonderful job. I was day bar manager for the NCO club at MacDill Air Force Base. And what a party time that was. Drinking and thank God, my mom and Frank, my brother, they got shipped to Germany where they stayed for a year. And while I was there, while I was in Florida, I had half my stomach removed with ulcers. I had destroyed my stomach so bad from drinking that honest to God, I drank scotch and milk, cream to milk, mint and scotch. I thought the mint would cool my stomach. I thought the milk would help so I could keep drinking. They told me, don't drink, don't smoke, give up coffee. all this stuff, and the only thing I did was I gave up coffee. For a long, long time, I gave up coffee. Thank God today I don't smoke and I don't drink. But I left Florida and I come back here and I took over the NAA club. No, for those of you who think I never had anything to do with BJ's Hideaway. That appeared, it was Walton's Cove, and I'd been sober about a year when some guy come in and took it over and named it BJ's Hideaway. Now, I did run the NAA club, National Aeronautics Association, at Aero Airport, north of there, which is now the dump. I had a swimming pool and 2 bars, and it was just a nice, you know, and I drank and I partied, and I got DWIs, and I got picked up for walking down Cornhusker Highway. I remember Judge Neil Dusenberry said, if you come back in my court, bring your toothbrush, because you're not going home. And I got that second DWI. I was scared to death because my probation read any alcohol related. Now this is back in 1973, early 74. Any alcohol related offense without conviction was an automatic $300 fine, which was a lot back then, and 30 days in jail. And thank God a wonderful woman named Donna Sutton grabbed a hold of me and came to court with me, and they put me in the Independence Center. My sobriety date is May 9th, 1974. You know, thank you. It's because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, one of the funny stories in sobriety, when I checked in, a lot of people need detoxed. They need to have you need to be cleansed of the alcohol, the drugs, whatever you've been doing. When I checked in, an old Army nurse, Hazel Barton, said, we're gonna watch you for the next few days. And I took that literally. I thought, watch me. And I was in treatment with 9, 10 guys. There was women just weren't going to treatment back then. Anyway, she said, we're going to be observing you. And I was in this little corner room on 5th floor at Lincoln General Hospital. And I thought, I went around that room and I looked around. This is honest to God's truth. I always said I was never paranoid or anything from my drinking. I looked around that room, I swear to God, I looked around that room, I unscrewed switch plates, and I was looking for that camera. I laid my clothes out, shut the lights off, dressed in the dark. I never wore makeup back then, so that was and I locked the bathroom. I had my own private bathroom in there. But I was sober several years, and I shared that with Hazel, and we laughed so hard. But, you know, to think about that, I turned pictures. I did everything looking for those cameras because they were watching me. I didn't spend much time in that room. And here's the other thing I did, honest to God's truth. I thought, if you're watching me, watch this. And I would do that all around the room, wherever I thought. I mean, talk about insane and goofy. Anyway, you know, you think about sobriety and you're happy and things are going good. When I got sober, thank God, and I really mean this, where my gratitude came in. Thank God for that policeman that did his job and put me in jail that night for a DWI. Thank God for Donna Sutton going to the judge and getting me into treatment. Thank God for Dr. John Bankston that found I had cancer. I wouldn't have known that if those series of events hadn't happened. I would not be standing up here with you today, and I know that in my heart. And thanks for Dr. Russell Gorthy. I had 3 major surgeries. all within a month's time. I had 15, 16 blood plasma transfusions. And he told me one time, I think your tissues, you're weak because of your drinking. So I had, and with the ulcers that I'd had several years before that, and the surgery, and half my stomach removed, you know, I don't know about you, but I did not take very good care of BJ when I was drinking. Through that drinking period, from the time I was 15 until I was 29 years old. And I will tell you that I turned 30 in treatment. My sister brought up these little cupcakes and we celebrated, and people out at my club were having champagne and cold duck and calling me, get out of there, come on, let's, you know. And at that point, I was there to pay the piper, and I made up my mind I'd give this program a year, and then I could go back doing what I wanted to do. But I would give it a year, and I don't know why I put a year on it. But everybody, Bob York and Paul Southern, and these old grumpy cigar-smoking poops that were there when I got here, and they used to say, now listen, girlie, let me tell you this, girlie. Ugh, God, I just want to rip their fingers off. But some of you may, I know Paul would remember Paul Southern and Ralph Fox and Bob York and Jack Kirkland. I will tell you, Jackie's here today. I love you, Jack. His dad's in the hospital at Bryan. He's got pneumonia. So keep that family in your prayers. We've had Jack around. He just celebrated 66 years of sobriety a couple of months ago. So this program is awesome. It really works. But it had not been for that series of events and those people, I swear to God, I wouldn't be standing up here today. A guy named Jack Wagner, I know Paul would remember Jack. I met him because his wife came into treatment just as I was leaving. It was another woman. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I couldn't go back into the bar and restaurant business at that time. And Jack said, hey, come to work for me down at Car Park. You can park cars. Now, this is in 1974. We'll give you $2 an hour and a penny for every car you park. And I thought, well, you got to be nuts. Here's Forky's auctioneers, all these big attorneys and stuff that used to come to my club. I didn't want them to see me parking no damn cars for $2 an hour. But I'm going to tell you what, don't ever tell me you can't get a job or you can't find a job. I took that job for a solid year. I parked cars and went up and down that little hand elevator, and I can park a car better than probably anybody you know. And the guys out here, when they line up motorcycles, they just stand there because they know I'm not going to hit their bikes. And I can parallel park right between them. And I get out, sometimes they go, you know, it's kind of fun. But I took that job, and while I was at that job, Bob, I can't remember his last name, he came to me. He was the head director of Lincoln Alcohol and Drugs in Lincoln. And him and a gal named Donna Giles, she's a registered nurse out at the VA, come to see me and said, we've heard about you in AA. And we think you got the personality. We want to put you in school. And I said, my God. By then, I'm 32 years old. I said, oh, I can't go to school. I'm too old for that. Well, I know a lot of you have gone back to school and got degrees, but they took me and they put me in some very, very intense training. And in 1976, I helped open the first detox center in Lincoln, Nebraska. It was under Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department. It was not under corrections. And we treated drunks like human beings. We bathed them. We had nice beds for them to sleep on. We took care of them. I picked ticks off of them. I had guys that I stripped down in nasty clothes and put them in a shower, and one time pulled me in the shower. He said, "You've seen a naked man before, don't leave me." And he pulled me into the shower with him, and I'm dripping wet, and I just started my shift. You know, I had a marvelous career. Now, I loved working at the Independence Center, but the first 8.5 years of my career, I worked with the Detox Center, Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department, and I worked crisis intervention. I worked with police officers, attorneys, and judges. Police would call me, and I would go out on calls with them, suicides. I took guns away from people, you know, that were threatening suicides. Sometimes I think back at some of that stuff, and I think, how did you do that? One of the people I loved the most, and some of you might know and heard me talk about Orville Cox. Been to treatment, I don't know, he said hundreds. But anyway, I used to work with Orville, and I'd go bring him in, and he always chewed that nasty stuff, and he, you know, and anyway, Orville died with almost 20 years of sobriety, got married in alcoholic. This is a chronic alcoholic off the street. You have no idea. I used to go pick up this little guy named Joby Phillips. And Joby had cataracts on his eyes. He couldn't see good. And he'd get this close to my face, and he'd say, little Indian guy, he'd say, "You're the ugliest white woman I ever saw. You just ugly." And he would periodically call the detox center and say, "Tell that ugly white woman to come get me. I'm on 14th and O." You know, I could go on and on and on. That was my favorite counseling career, just working the streets of Lincoln, Nebraska, and chronic. They kind of gone backwards, I think, now, because they throw them in a little cell with a mattress on the floor. We never treated drunks that way. We never, ever. We treated them with dignity. They were sick people. But I had a wonderful career, and then they came to me. I was offered a fantastic job in California, in San Francisco, when I was dating Don Breeden. And I just couldn't leave Lincoln, Nebraska for some reason. And when I come back from that trip, Jack Bueller came to me and at the detox center. He says, "Come see me next week. We got an opening. We think you'd fit in." And I think it was always kind of a dream to go back and work where I started in 1974. So I went there. I was an intake. I did the multiple MMPI tests. I did intakes. I did outpatient. I did aftercare. I did a very intense men's evening care program. Wonderful career. Wonderful career. It was all because of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, I've never been without a sponsor. I've always sponsored. I've always worked the steps. I've always gone to meetings. I've always done the deal, and that's why I'm standing here today. I do the deal. You know, I've got a favorite little book here. I want to tell you another thing I got to tell you. In sobriety, I thought I was sober 3 years, and I'm working, I'm a counselor at detox, and I think I should get married. Well, so I did. Now I married an alcoholic, and I thought if he loved me, he'd stay sober. Now I'm telling you, I got married out of high school, got one daughter, got married when I was running the Fire and Flame Club for Clem Gahn, who was the public defender, his bar. And I didn't have six years total in my first 3 marriages, honest to God. And anyway, I thought I had to get married. You know, I'm sober. So I married an alcoholic, and by the time I was sober 5 years, I knew I was in trouble. And I went to a counselor that was running a manual treatment center up in Omaha, Joe Brady, a friend of mine. And I said, I'm so scared, I'm so angry, I'm so depressed, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And honest to God, that man looked right at me and said, you got your head so far up your ass you can't breathe. Well, anyway, they put me in treatment for 30 days as the spouse of an alcoholic. And I'm here to tell you, as the spouse of a practicing alcoholic, I think I was 10 times sicker than I ever was as the alcoholic. And I could see my mother and how my mother put up with my dad and her second marriage and the alcoholism and that. And I knew I was in trouble. I don't know if I ever felt like I wanted to drink, but I got out of that marriage. I was on the fence, and I'm sure you've all been there. Do I leave? Do I stay? Do I leave? Do I stay? Well, thank God I had the courage to get out of that marriage and continued back into my career. And I was sober 10 years, and a gal named Karen Garrison, you probably all heard her tape. I went to high school with her. And we took off and went back east. My grandson, Doug, was turning a year old, and I was turning 40. So we took this road trip back east, went to Washington, D.C., we had a wonderful time. I come back, I walk into a meeting, and there's old Blue Eyes. And somebody was having a party that night, and I said, well, why don't you take me to that party? He said, oh, man, I already got a date. Now, I didn't know Claire from nothing. And then I saw him a few weeks later at a Wednesday noon meeting that we used to have over at Hope Auditorium on 16th. And I always had criteria. Most of you women we have criteria. You can't smoke, you can't drink, you gotta have money, you gotta have a nice job, and you gotta have a nice car, and no baggage, no kids. Because my daughter was up and gone. And I'm sitting in this meeting, and I look over, and there's old Blue Eyes, and he's got this McDonald's cup. And he's chewing it, and he's taking the wax. He goes all the way around that cup and getting that wax, and he take a bite of it. And I thought, that poor fool can't afford gum. You know, and I was in love. He had a rotten 16-year-old son that decided he wanted to live with his dad instead of his mother. He didn't have a job. He had a set of golf clubs, a mattress on the floor in this apartment he was renting. I don't know. We started dating June 10th, and that's the anniversary of Alcoholics Anonymous, June 10th. We started dating June 10th, moved in together in September with that rotten son of his, and got married December 8th. 6 months. 38 years ago, folks. 38 years ago. Working on 39. We were both young, and I think it was lust, hormones, you know. But we have such a wonderful relationship. We have a friendship. And I do this once in a while, because that's who I am. But he is one of the other than Donna Sutton, Claire was one of the first persons that ever accepted me for me. He's never tried to change. Now, he don't always like my behavior, don't get me wrong, but he's never tried to change me. He has never tried to change me. He lets me be BJ, even when times he don't like it. We have a wonderful life. We wake up in the morning, I usually get up about a half hour before Claire. I'm at 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I'm awake, and if it's nice weather, I'm out on my deck and I'm having coffee, and sometimes he'll come out there and meet me with a glass of orange juice, and we visit and listen to country western music. We go in, we watch the news, we play a little competitive gin rummy. By the way, I won this morning. And we play a little gin rummy, and then we go downstairs in our family room where we have an old jukebox with, I think there's 100 CDs on it, so you know there's over 1,000 songs on it. We play the jukebox, we exercise a little. I've got an Elvis Presley pinball game, and we play very competitive pinball, about 4 to 6 games in the morning. I won that this morning too, I'm very happy to tell you. But we have a great life. We travel good together. We got friends. They don't go together. They don't travel together. They don't we are together. We sleep in the same bed. I know so many couples, separate beds. Nope, we don't do that. Claire and I have a connection that I never dreamed possible. I owe that connection and relationship to Alcoholics Anonymous. I owe it to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I know a lot of you in this room. Some of you I don't, but a lot of you I know from my treatment days. And I know your story, Jim. I love you. And life is good. Do the deal. Go to meetings, get a sponsor, get somebody you trust. My little Clara is here. I have sponsored Clara for 23 or 4. 24 years I've sponsored that little gal. Watched her go through health stuff with her husband. I've watched her go through stuff with her family. I watched her lose her little puppy dog. She had a wiener dog. She likes wiener dogs. She got one on her chest. But I've watched this little gal go through stuff, and we don't always agree. And a lot of times, but we talk about it. And she's never stopped loving me. She doesn't always like what I tell her or I suggest. But we've stayed very connected. I watched this little gal go from treatment to a halfway house for a year. The keys to her house were taken away. All of her jewelry was taken away. She lost everything, almost lost her nursing career. Now, if you ever need somebody in hospice, there's your little girl. She works hospice, and how she watches people die day after day, I'll never know. But she's like a little angel. She got her rings back, got her keys back to her house. Husband remarried her after divorcing her, got her nursing career back, and is very, very respected. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, we stood up for James and Roe in Laughlin, Nevada under a palm tree and watched those kids get married. Great time. Kenny and Vicky were witnesses in our home. We had a lot of weddings in our home. We just went, Jeff and Yolanda got married Friday, and we went. I hadn't been in a courtroom for a long time. I was kind of looking around. But we got them married on Friday and then went out for a nice dinner. Paul is probably the only person in this room that I drank with or drank around. He used to service the pinball machines and jukeboxes at my club, out at the NA club out at Arrow Airport. And that's how I got to know Paul. And I watched Paul come into his very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's just right under me in sobriety and has maintained it through health issues, family issues. You know, this program works if you work it. You've got to go to meetings. You've got to get a sponsor. You've got to do the steps. The best healing I did when I did 8 and 9, you know, made that list of people that I had harmed. I wanted to look at all the ones that had harmed me, trust me. But I was able. That stepdad I hated for so many years, he worked for a company, trucking company called Pruka out on about 20th and Cornhusker. And my mom was divorced for him, and I'm an adult in my 20s. And I used to go out because I knew he'd come in at 2 or 3 in the morning. I'd put sand and gravel in his gas tank, I'd let the air out of his tires, anything that I could to sabotage this man. And you know, I had to go to him on step 9 and make that amend. I'm the one that's been doing that. And here's my excuses to drink over the years. And I looked that man and I said, you will never, ever be my excuse to drink again. Never. You know what? The past is the past, but I don't have to live that anymore, you see. It's one of the promises. We won't shut the door, but we don't have to dwell. We don't have to sit in self-pity and whine. My little girls call me once in a while, and they'll be whining. I let them go on for a while, and then I'll say, okay, you can do that for about another 5 minutes, and then get over it. Or they'll be whining, and I'll go, wah, wah, wah. What a little whiny tit. Wah, wah, wah. You know, and they laugh, and they get over it. But this program is an awesome, awesome way to live. People should use this program that aren't alcoholic. You know, most drug people, they like AA better than they like NA. Well, that's okay. We all have a desire. We've all been unmanageable. We've all had the powerlessness. But these steps, if you do a thorough 4th and 5th step, you look at yourself, look at the garbage, get rid of all the negative, all the bad stuff. Get rid of it. You can be happy, joyous, and free. Every day, I swear to God to you, I wake up and I stretch. And sometimes I get a cramp in the calf of my left leg. But I can get up and I can stretch. And you know what? My hands work. I can see. I'm getting older and I got aches and pains, but damn it, I'm alive. I am alive today, and I owe that to Alcoholics Anonymous. I swear to you. I don't know where, this is one of my favorite books. I've used it for years. It's called Stools and Bottles, and it builds the stool. There used to be a guy that would go around and do a little demonstration of this. But like some of the daily reminders, one of them is, let's be honest today. Let's face facts. Alcohol is a beverage for most people, but it's a drug for alcoholics. Uncontrolled use of this narcotic has made us sick in body, mind, and spirit. We're powerless. And then another one I like today. At times, our vitality is low. Being restless and jittery, we have the urge to drink. And I'll bet every one of you in this room has had the urge to drink at some time in your sobriety. Irritable, unhappy, self-centered, we work back into our favorite spot, the driver's seat. Resentment, worry, blah, blah, blah. There ain't no room for that in this program. There's no room for resentment, anger. I watch more people get drunk over anger and resentment because they refuse to let go of it. So I'm here to tell you today that I love you. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't tell you how much. So have a good day's sobriety. I do about 10 things I'm grateful every day. Do 5. Anything. That's all I got. Thank you very much.